hello out there. This is Sam Kilmer, Managing Director for Cornerstone Advisors, joining you for another In the Hall, unscripted episode of Fintech Hustle. And I say we're in the hall, not quite. We're fire pitting here. This is actual real fire. So if my sport coat sets a fire mid-episode, you'll know that I didn't do it right. But I'm here at the JAM FINTOP second annual summit, joined here by a rock star crew to talk a little bit about the industry, what's going on. And I'm joined by Sarah Howell, who's the Senior Vice President, Partnership Programs at Infinant. Dan O'Malley here, CEO and co-founder of Numerated, and the co-host with the most / Pocket Squares are us, partner Cornerstone, Dominick. So, hey, we're glad to be here with you. And I thought maybe I would just start off by having everybody tell us a little bit about the day in their life of fintech. And Sarah, I'll put you on the spot first and tell us a little bit like what it's like to be Sarah Howell at Infinant for a day.
You know, it's pretty busy. I am head of partnerships there, but I get to wear so many different hats. Sometimes I'm doing products, sometimes I'm doing sales, solutions engineering. And I think that's why I love the startup life. You know, call me crazy, but that's a day in the life of Sarah Howell.
Okay, so we're calling her crazy for the rest of the time? I'm taking this before I get over to my man right here. But, Sam and I have had a chance to host the Hustle before. We were in Seattle. No, we were in Vancouver when we did this the first time. And it went so spectacularly well that Sam took a year before inviting me back on. So I did bring the pocket square, not the hat. Obviously, that's Sam's thing to do. But one of the cool things I think we can all agree on is the business of banking really continues to be pretty spectacular. As challenging as the next few months, few quarters, even few years might look, there's so many smart, creative folks that are trying to solve hard problems to help move the industry forward. And I know that I come into this hoping that the different tech companies that have different teams and tools and approaches will help keep the industry vibrant so that we're not finding ourselves looking at maybe 10 big banks in the future. Like, nobody wants 3 airlines or options. I don't think we need like 10 JP Morgan sized institutions. And it's the work of companies like this that are going to keep us with a healthy, vibrant community bank system.
What's a day in the life of Dan look like?
A day in the life. It is pretty varied. I like that description. Yeah, I think, I spend most of my time either talking with customers, working on partnerships. Partnerships is a big area of development for us. We've built a lot of great product, and we can both sell that directly or we can distribute through partners increasingly. So I'm spending close to half my time working on that. And then just leading the team. I get the privilege of leading the 80 people who are at Numerated and helping them understand how to do the best work of their careers. And that is incredibly satisfying as well.
Special guest coming through, Sam.
I know. I see. Could it be? Is it? Could it be? This is what happens when you're in the hall. There is no unscripting.
We have a former guest that's right here.
We have Sia Vanzia from Connect One and Bowfly, and let's see what else. Venture On
coming at you soon.
Oh, okay, very good. Not shameless really. Plug. Oh, we don't allow those, but okay, we'll let it this once slide.
I only crashed because Al told me to.
Okay, thank you for crashing. No, I love it. Thanks, Sia. Appreciate that. Well, that's great, and actually, Dan, I love one of your points that you made earlier in the session around how. Banks, if I'm paraphrasing, and pardon the Indiana kid here paraphrasing because it probably won't come out as fluently, but something along the lines of banks decide by consensus and consensus doesn't quite cut it most of the time, or something like that. Is it? Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? I thought that was a pretty interesting comment.
Yeah, happy to. So when it comes to trying new things, like, you're going to take risk, right? It's just the nature of trying something you haven't done it before. It's therefore risky. And banks typically manage risk by committee. There are entire committees, multiple ones in banks devoted to managing risk. And if you are trying to decide whether you should do something new or not with a committee, you're just not going to do it, right? Someone's going to find a way to say no. And so my opinion and my approach when I've been in financial institutions trying to do new things is you just need to empower a person or maybe like a couple people who have the authority to decide to take risk. And It's not unlimited risk. They can't do whatever they want. And it should be somebody who knows how to box it in and manage the risk. But like, you got to make a single person accountable for like making the decision. Because groups of people don't like to, all accept risk. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And I should have pointed out when I introduced both of you that you were at Capital One, you were at Eastern Bank. So you're kind of one of those interesting personalities in that you were the banker and you were the fintecher. And of course, we're JAM FinTop. So we're all in the investor world too. And Sarah, I know prior to Infinant, you Visa and TSIS. And I mean, so the backgrounds here are varied in terms of not. Yeah.
Okay. So as you're bringing up Dan's point and you guys are talking about all the different experiences, I heard the same thing and it jogged my memory. I was down in Austin maybe 3 or 4 years ago with USAA. And so I was invited into their design lab and I took a few photos. So I actually found them. So they have on their walls signs that say, stop talking and make something, focus on problems worth solving, do it again. Empathy and understanding are not the same thing. Make fun of everything, ask why, ideas are free, try it as a natural dialogue, have an opinion, close your laptop and show me. And so I just, again, I'm just pulling this out because I think Dan's mindset and his message to everyone is empowering your team and trusting them to make smart, educated decisions. They'll never be perfect, but it's much better to act with some purpose. And I think that's one of the big themes that I picked up today was you've got to be faster in the way you do things. You cannot just sit and wait for things to be, commercially available. Like, get after it. Try some stuff. Like the AI session that came up this morning. I don't know if you thought that was pretty cool, but maybe you could talk about that real fast.
Well, I don't know about the AI part. I have really enjoyed just speaking to some amazing people here. I did ask the guy that was so well eloquent about the AI, about what he thought Biden's executive order would mean for AI and the watermark capabilities of the government, but not allowing other companies or institutions, or not mandating that they use a watermark. Because at what point do you know what's been human created versus AI created? So I think that opens up a whole other can of worms. But I would like to piggyback off on, really what you were saying, Dan, and that's what I told you earlier. I really appreciated what you had to say, just about having that main person in the organization with the decision-making power. What I do think that requires is a enormous amount of personal courage. I think what's been hard as an innovator that lived in these big organizations, that you were always forcing the organization or seeing things ahead of where other people saw them. And then you had to have the personal courage, regardless of where you were in the organization, to say, this is what we should do because that's where the market's headed. And sometimes I've done that and it's kind of at great personal risk. And so I would love to get y'all's thoughts on, like, what do you think as far as being a change agent in an organization, what that means to you personally and what you have to do on a personal perspective to have the courage to make that decision?
Yeah. Man, I have many stories here. I mean, I kind of feel like if you're doing change right and you want to do it fast, because if change can take like 10 years, then okay, great. It's not that hard, actually. But if you need to do it fast, like, people are not going to like you. They're just not going to like you. You're going to cause them problems. They're going to think you're wrong. They're going to think you're stupid. Let me see. I got called. All the names I got called.
You could go not safe for work on this one too.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Maybe I will. I was told by the chief credit officer of the bank that the test that I wanted to run was amoral. It was wrong. I was told by a board member of the bank that I was a heretic, which I thought was kind of cool, actually. I was like, that's a good one.
Stuff right there.
Yeah.
They're going to take you out to Plymouth Rock and be like, I'm going to show you what we do with folks like you.
That's right. Yeah.
Da Vinci and Dan.
Yeah. Yeah. And the most tense situation. So it was a meeting. It was basically the 6 most senior people at the bank, and we were talking about the first credit test we were going to run, and we were going to do loans that we thought might probably go bad. And so the chief lender of the bank, who's a great guy, and I'll tell a story at the end that'll make this all okay. I promise. He was like getting visibly irritated in the meeting. He wasn't speaking. His face was turning red. And finally he exploded and he like smashed his fist on the table. And again, it's the 6 most senior people in the bank sitting around talking. And he said, "This is the stupidest fucking idea I've ever heard." And he's staring at me while he's saying it. And I was like, I'm just going to sit here and take it. I'm not even going to say a thing. I'm just going to sit here and just kind of smile. And so we sat like that for 30 full seconds of silence. And finally, the CEO of the bank said, "Well, I think we're done." And he stood up and he walked out of the room. We all left. Like, that was a real senior meeting at the bank because we were trying to drive change and he hated me. But we did the test. It was very successful. We didn't lose any money on the test, actually. We made money on the loans we made. And that same guy referred the 6th customer of Numerated to us. And I bought him a nice bottle of wine, and he's a wonderful human. So
one thing that you bring up, a good extreme example of it too, is that when I've been doing strategic planning with clients over the years, including in banks, not just in tech firms, is, if you're not having any conflict, if you're not having any, we can have an argument about whether or not, there should be F-bombs dropped in the boardroom. But I think the main thing is if there's not good, hearty, beyond debate, like people that are passionate about it, I think you're doing it wrong. And I like the fact that that it did come full circle. But even if it didn't come full circle, I tend to think that the pressure creates that back and forth still creates a good outcome. And so it's kind of one of the, I'm glad that you let it breathe for 30 seconds. I'd love to believe that I would have been able to do that. I think that's an incredibly strong thing to do. But I don't know. So anyway, that's great. And I heard some really promising things today. But I would also just love you, whether it's inside the walls of JAM FinTop, the summit here or not, I would also just love your perspectives on what you see in the industry right now. What do you think might be working well or not well? And I guess we can start on the positive side. What do you guys see that you think is working really well right now in fintech? Anything jump out at you as just something that you see just working really well, whether it's on the business or the technical side? Anybody want to take a shot at that?
I don't know if I'd say it's in fintech. I think what I'm really encouraged by is some of the collaboration that I'm seeing among the banks, especially relative to driving and affecting change and coming together to lobby for change that's going to help the community banks and drive them forward, and even sharing information. And I'm seeing this, with AFC and with Alloy Labs and some of these guys that are taking problems that community banks have, and they're actually sharing those problems and trying to solve those problems together. And I think the greater the collaboration that we can see in the community banking space, the greater the chance for us to have a strong community banking sector moving forward, and not the 12 banks that you talked about earlier.
Well, it's interesting, Sam, when you think about just the nature of fintech and how in some ways the bloom is off the rose for a lot of the conversations. So if you go back to 2015, 2016, people are, still trying to wrestle with, is this friendly? Is this a foe? I think there's a little bit of fatigue that's set in. People have heard the stories, even here, there's some great companies, but they, like Numerated, had to acknowledge, hey, we've been in this portfolio. You've heard what we've done, but there's some really interesting stuff that we've been able to iterate off of and continue to press and to grow. So it's not living on past success. I love that nobody talked about the triple P, rollouts, because that was 3 years ago. I mean, and yeah, that's massively successful, but we are not finding a lot of companies living in the past. They're trying to look ahead and help people to pre-position themselves for things. So it's not to be a fortune teller, and I think there's a lot more pragmatism that I can see for tech executives that understand we're going to go a lot further together than we can as individuals. And so, when I just take a step back, it's not about the technology, because that is a tool that helps drive an outcome. It's the business approach that so many executives are now taking around a fire pit like this, where it's, hey, we've got to do something a lot more creative. We've got to differentiate. We've got to distinguish ourselves. Fintechs are known as great marketers, but there's some really smart banks. See just popping in. Connect One's done some great stuff. I mean, it takes a village, and that's where events like this are so important, because people can be reminded that there's opportunity. Even in bad times, there's opportunity, and you just keep pressing, and you just keep looking at how you do it together.
I'll go kind of ultra specific on one thing that I heard today, which was really positive, I thought. You see a lot of bad headlines about BaaS in the news. You hear about like imminent consent orders about to happen. And so you think, oh man, is BaaS dead? It ain't dead. Holy cow. I heard some numbers today about billions of dollars of funding coming into banks. And I'm like, whoa, that's with the B. That's a lot. And so I think the ability for nimble, smart, well-managed, compliance-savvy banks to pull in a lot of deposits, which is incredibly important. It's happening.
Well, I mean, you think about a BaaS provider. And so without going into names, there's, 80 or so that are doing things. Maybe 20, 25 would be considered like really professional in their stance. Think about how much money folks cite JP Morgan spending. Well, those BaaS banks, essentially with all the different tech companies, are able to match their marketing muscle. So if you're, like a Coastal, who is the bank behind One Main, which is the Walmart, stuff, that cloud, that marketing cloud, translates back to the bank. So there, to your point, I think there's some really positive, things. I love the consortiums that are being developed and how people are saying, hey, we got to tell our side of the story. We can't let the narrative be taken from us. And that's a change from previous years. I mean, there's been groups that have been trying this, but I think it's a better coordinated effort that will reflect well on the entire industry, because you're right. Some of the, the BaaS folks that are being written off, like, do take that victory lap at your own risk.
I might just piggyback since you did mention BaaS, and that's really kind of where we focus at Infinant is just in this space. There's so many different business models of BaaS. There's the indirect and the direct, where the system of record does not belong to the bank. It's outside of the bank's ecosystem. And then we're seeing a new move towards, a BaaS model where you have the direct relationship with the tech provider or the embedded finance provider, and then you are system of record. When I'm talking to banks about their BaaS strategy, have all three of them and pivot and use a good tech stack that allows you to do it in a safe and sound manner. There's some banks out there, some of the guys that have been in it for a very long time. One of them I met with last week at Money 2020, 160 million accounts on file through their BaaS platform, their BaaS clients. Yeah, I mean, it's staggering. It's staggering. And so there is a lot of opportunity, but this is a time for community banks to come together and protect the space, because BaaS is moving up market, and we want to be able to make sure that the community banks have what they need to power their BaaS strategies, regardless of which business model they choose, so that they can compete for the business if it does move up market.
Yeah. Sam, you usually are the one asking questions. Can we turn around on you and say, like, what had you falling out of your chair today?
Okay, so I can't remember her name, but she was so smart, from FiSpan. Yeah, Lisa. I just loved how detailed how gritty and into it she was on how ERP systems connect through to cash management. And it's kind of like Dan in our earlier conversations a couple years ago about, the connection between a loan origination system and spreading. To some that might seem like a very arcane thing. It turns out that's a really important. There's a lot of breakdown in that, right? There's a lot of if there's any connection at all, there's a lot of breakdown between things like ERP systems and treasury systems. I think treasury in general is an area that just does not get nearly as much coverage as maybe it should in terms of the ultimate power play of the banking industry, in terms of so much commercial banking going on, so many people needing strong, loyal deposits to go with those loans. Treasury's right in the middle of that equation and solving for very specific use cases. Whenever I hear the examples and storytelling, like you said, it was Lisa from FiSpan, Lisa Shields, fantastic. I was just blown away by that. But there were several things I heard today. Riaz's lots of different observations. There was a gentleman from a compliance software company that was giving very specific examples around the pass rates and things of that nature that I thought, well, Sarah, in some of our conversations before, compliance isn't always the sexiest topic. So if you can be very specific And I will say, I'm going to come back and ask a negative question now. What could be working better in the industry? And I'll give you one straight from the stage today. I thought that easily 2/3 of the company pitches were needlessly boring.
You're stealing my thunder on this.
Well, this is what we do. This is what we. Yeah, that's right. We're cooperating here, Al. Come on. So that's my. I would just ask you guys, give us some thought. What do you think? We talk about things that are working well. What do you think could be working better in this? And my take is great product coming out, people putting sprints into their product development, and then needlessly not sprinting their 60-second pitch so that it's an interesting example right out of the gate, as opposed to, hi, I'm blah, blah, blah from blah, 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 and here's what we blah, blah, blah. I think that could be so much better and more inspirational. Maybe I'm too harsh of a critic because I came from that world, but anyway, anybody have any takes on things? Sarah?
I would echo that comment, but what I think what it's showing is that selling into banks is much more nuanced and much more sophisticated than it was pre-VC winter. When a lot of fintechs were trying to compete with the bank, and they're realizing you can't. And so now they're shifting their business model to sell into banks. But what I'm realizing is that it's very hard to sell in banks. You have to know their problems at a granular level. Just like you said, Lisa knew that in those treasury experiences, when you are actually trying to integrate and keep that commercial client happy by integrating into their ERP system, you better know all of those problems that have to exist, right? And conversely, suppose an API that FiSpan can pick up and integrate into the ERP. But if the bank has 2 or 3 accounts and that ERP system has broken up the commercial clients into, accounting into several sub accounts, then it's a recon nightmare. So now, banker, let us help you solve that problem and create sub accounts on a side ledger, right? But again, you have to really understand the banker's problem in order to sell. And I think that's why you saw what you saw.
Well, and again, watching the growth of Numerated has been pretty cool over the years. And I remember Dan getting on stage when everyone else was trying to sell their wares. And he was like, hey, look, I've just got some playbooks that work. And I'm just going to, kind of put them up, let you walk yourself through. It's not so much about work with Numerated. It's more, we've got to show you how these outcomes are achieved. And the tech is one part, but it's culture, it's people, it's the investment of creativity. And so, sitting there listening to some of these presentations, I think there's a missed opportunity for some, especially like you mentioned the AI stuff, not wanting to go down that path. The reason I love presentations like that is you're able to essentially look at what's now and what's next. And I had a conversation with Sarah Hinkfus, who with Bain's Venture Group, and she basically says you can look at the hype, you can look at the hope, and you can look at the happening. And I love that kind of mental model when thinking about some of these emerging concepts, because the hype is really important. Like, we've got to understand what's getting people's attention. And so instead of saying, well, the hype, don't pay attention to it, it's the exact opposite. Why are people getting so interested in some of these potential applications? But then let's segment out the hope so that we're not wasting time on things that are not practical. But what's happening right now, that's almost like the key takeaway. Because if I'm in a bank or if I'm at a tech company, I want to know what's actually getting done and who's integrating, who's implementing. And I think that's where, again, your observation, Sam, was a good one. A lot of companies are trying to say, hey, look, we've got a great team. We've got a great story. Everyone's got a great something. But if you could say, here's some hype, pay attention to it. Here's the hope. We're going to remove it. But what's happening right now that's material to your business is X, Y, and Z. Like, that's a pretty strong presentation.
Yeah, I'll maybe talk a little bit about kind of the solving actual problems and really understanding what they are. That really resonated with me. And I think it can be hard because when hype happens in an industry and everyone's like, oh, I need a platform for X, it's very easy to show up and have a conversation with the bank and be like, oh, we're a platform for X. And honestly, you can waste a bunch of time for both the bank and as a technology company, your team, and not get to a deal because it wasn't really a problem that anybody needs to solve. And I'm just going to pick one little example and maybe like double click on it a couple times and dig in and be like, this is a problem that doesn't actually need to be solved. It's going to be controversial. I'm going to warn you in advance. So everybody knows they need more deposits, right? That has to happen. Great. So I need a business deposit account opening solution, right? So I can open up business deposit accounts online, right? Okay, great. We had a lot of conversations about business deposit account opening. We provided it Numerated. I was very excited about it. But here's the problem. How many business deposit accounts does a typical $5 billion bank open in a year? I don't know, a couple hundred, maybe 100. How many of those would actually open up online? I don't know, maybe 10%, 10, 20. If you put an online application up for any product at the bank, you're going to get at least 1,000 fraudulent applications. So 1,000 pieces of fraud to get 10 accounts. That is not a problem that is worth solving with technology. But everybody thinks that they should buy a solution. And the answer is, well, you need a strategy to actually drive volume in good applications, people who want to come and apply for business deposit accounts at your bank. But you do not have those today. And if you're not talking about that problem, technology is worthless. It's just nobody's going to buy it. And so there have been a number of like frustrating conversations over the years we've had at Numerated where we're like, we have great technology. And a great team. But it doesn't matter sometimes. It's if the problem is not actually one that should be solved. So,
yeah, and also, Sarah, you mentioned Money 2020, and I'll give a shout out to Chris Nichols, who had a great write up on LinkedIn. I think it was his 8 or 9 or 10 takeaways from Money 2020, and right there in the middle, like number 5. It's never seems to be number 1 on most lists, but it's like number 5 was fraud, and how that was a big topic. And to me, it seems like it's not even the elephant in the room. It's the reason why there's a holdup on FedNow adoption. It's always the reason, which is we're not. I don't. That guy doesn't like fraud either. Apparently, in that raging pickup back there. But welcome to Nash Vegas, right? We're here. We are. That's right. So shout out to Chris Nichols on that. It was a great write up. And I also want to say, for the record, if anybody thinks that we're only dealing in high level buzzwords and niceties here, let it be known that we used the word, and the royal we, Sarah used the words recon nightmare, and what was it that prefaced that? You said we have a sub accounts and a recon nightmare.
You're an accuser of dropping the F-bomb on here, Sam.
I'm thinking to myself, hashtag sub accounts, hashtag recon nightmare. I'm like, this is the kind of, I love talking about this kind of stuff. Yeah, I love this stuff. So you guys, thank you so much for joining us for a chat today. We had so much fun. I know I did, but I'm a banking nerd. This is all I know. I guess you could say I'm institutionalized after this. I started as a floating teller in college, and I never got out. And I just love it so much, and love hearing about all the specific stories and takeaways. And so from almost live from the JAM FinTop Summit, here another episode of or unscripted in the hall, kind of sort of episode of FinTech Hustle. Thanks again, and we'll see you hopefully on the next episode.